Cybersecurity risk assessments help organizations understand, control, and mitigate all forms of cyber risk. It's a critical component of a risk management strategy and data protection efforts. The primary purpose of a cyber risk assessment is to help keep stakeholders informed and support proper responses to identified risks. They also provide an executive summary to help executives and directors make informed decisions about security. There are many actions you can undertake within the UpGuard platform to help understand the level of risk associated with your vendors. UpGuard offers a complete vendor risk assessment framework packaged in a single workflow, which allows you to compile all your risk assessment activities and information, assess and comment on the level of risk a vendor poses to your organization, and save as a point-in-time assessment for future reference and comparison. This quarter, we've expanded our risk assessment framework so that you can waive risks within each individual risk assessment. This feature streamlines the risk waiver workflow so you can now create, review, and waive all risks within a risk assessment. But before I show you how this works, let's step back and let me walk you through the best practices around how you can perform risk assessments in UpGuard. There are many actions I can take within the UpGuard platform to help me understand the level of risk associated with my vendors. I start by monitoring and tiering my vendors. This will allow me to classify vendors based on the level of security risk they introduce to my organization. The benefit of separating vendors into different tiers is that it creates a more efficient risk assessment workflow that considers the specific risk threshold of all my vendors. Vendor tiering allows me to streamline the vendor risk management process so that my security team is able to manage third-party risks more intelligently. A helpful feature that I can use to collect information about a vendor to form the basis for tiering is the vendor relationship questionnaire. This is an internal tool that allows me to collect and consolidate information from my internal team when there's a request to conduct a security assessment on a new vendor, or upon onboarding a new vendor, and I want to capture information about the specific business relationship. To set up this questionnaire, I click on Settings, and then the Vendor Management tab. Here, I can use the default vendor relationship questionnaire that's available and edit or customize as required. Once started, the relationship questionnaire can be found on the vendor summary page for a particular vendor. Once I have the required information, I can start assigning tiers to the vendors I'm monitoring. One way to do this is to go to the vendors screen and click on the plus button next to a vendor in the tier column. Once I've tiered my vendors, I click on Executive Summary under Vendor Risk to see the vendor risk matrix. The matrix shows each vendor's security rating, indicating the likelihood of a security incident occurring, plotted against the vendor tier, which indicates the impact on my organization if the vendor were to have a security incident. A major benefit of the matrix is that it can help guide me on the level of risk assessment to be performed at each vendor tier. For example, I can perform a simple risk assessment on my Tier 3 vendors. These are the vendors that are towards the lower left of the matrix, which are considered low impact and low risk to my organization. To perform a risk assessment, I click onto one of the cells to see a filtered list of vendors that sit in that cell of the risk matrix. When I click on a vendor, it takes me to the new vendor summary page. This page has been redesigned to make it easier for me to see all the information critical to understanding and assessing the security posture of my vendor. As part of the updated vendor summary page, I now see all the risk assessment activities and evidence consolidated under the risk assessment framework. From here, I can perform a simple risk assessment, such as a quick review of automated scanning results for domains and IPs, or view the risks within the UpGuard Cyber Risk Rating section and choose to waive or remediate individual risks. Another way the risk matrix can help guide me in the level of risk assessment to be performed at each vendor tier is to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment. This may be required for a Tier 1 vendor who poses a meaningful risk to my organization due to the data they'll be handling. In the vendor risk matrix, they sit within the top right-hand corner and are colored red. First, I click on the cell for my Tier 1 high-risk vendors and into the vendor summary. I then click on the blue Conduct Assessment button under Risk Management. The risk assessment workflow within UpGuard comprises of 3 stages, which is clearly labeled as I scroll down the page. The first stage is to gather and select evidence. This stage is about collecting all the information in order to assess the risk level of a vendor. There are 2 steps I can perform here. The first is to send security questionnaires to help identify potential weaknesses among my vendors by gathering additional information that automated scanning cannot surface, such as information on security policies. The second step is to attach any additional evidence regarding the security posture of the vendor. This could include information which is publicly available, made available by the vendor through their UpGuard shared profile, or documentation I've gathered through discussions with the vendor, such as a SOC 2 Type 2 audit report or any other regulatory audit reports, or even previous security assessments. The second stage is to review the risks. Based on the nature of the risk, the evidence provided in stage 1, and the criticality of the vendor, I need to decide which risks need to be remediated. To request remediation on a risk or group of risks, I click on Request Remediation. The last stage of the risk assessment workflow is to add commentary. Here I can summarize the results of my risk assessment based on all the evidence and vendor responses from the first 2 stages. I also include key pieces of evidence or key risks, any follow-up actions that I'm recommending to improve the risk profile for this vendor, and any overall recommendations for dealing with this vendor. To finalize the assessment, I click on Complete Assessment. A new feature that UpGuard has recently released is the ability to waive risks within individual risk assessments. For any risk within the risk assessment, I can click on the expand arrow and select Waive Risk on the overall risk or for a particular domain. A modal will then appear that shows a condensed version of the risk waiver workflow. I review the domains and IPs selected, make any changes if necessary, then click on Confirm and Next. The next screen shows stage 2 of the current risk assessment framework that I mentioned earlier. I answer the questions within the modal. Here I'll confirm that I can approve the waiver myself, enter a justification for waiving the risk, and specify that the waiver does not expire. I then click on Confirm and Next. I review the information relating to the risk waiver on the next screen to ensure it's correct, and then click Complete. I can now see that the risk has had its status updated to waived within the risk assessment. There are a number of reasons why you want to perform a cyber risk assessment, and a few reasons you need to, such as reducing long-term costs, saving you time by having a risk assessment template for future assessments, avoiding data breaches and regulatory issues, and mitigating data loss. Risk assessments are integral to information risk management and any organization's wider risk management strategy. Therefore, performing regular risk assessments using the UpGuard framework will ensure you have a comprehensive and common understanding of your vendor's security posture, a central place to find any information pertaining to their risk profile, and a clear picture of how this has changed over time so you can plan for the future and make better business decisions. Creating risk waivers within risk assessments adds to the overall risk assessment functionality and will save you time managing risk waivers, as you can now efficiently create and manage new risk waivers from within each risk assessment, rather than having to leave the risk assessment workflow. It will also provide you with accurate information relating to the point-in-time assessment for each risk by showing information pertaining to each risk and its waiver. This feature is now available for all UpGuard vendor risk customers. If you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A or contact support@upguard.com.